YouTube, what's going on? So I recently bought a cheap $150 shed off Amazon. The only thing with that shed is it didn't have flooring, it didn't have a base. So I was gonna put it as is, but I decided to make a little paver base. Easier said than done, actually. I thought it was gonna be a quick job. It turned out to be a little bit more than a quick job, and here it is. So I actually started out by replacing that piece of fencing because I wasn't gonna be able to access it anymore. So might as well get that done right now. So what I'm doing here is loosening the ground up with a tiller. The soil I have is really rough and really hard to dig. So I had to use that tiller to just loosen that soil up and make it a little bit easier. So I only dug about 3 inches here. So if you're doing a real patio, something on a bigger scale, you're gonna wanna dig about 7 inches. Just depends on the size of your paver. Because you need 3 inches for your gravel base, and then you need 1 inch for your sand, and then whatever the size of your paver is. But since this area is not going to be trafficked, it's going to be a real small pad, I'm just going 3 inches because that's really all I need. So this is about 2 inches of gravel base, give or take. And the only reason I decided to do this pad out of pavers is because I had a lot of leftover material from a previous patio that I built. I could have easily just leveled the ground and put my shed on top of that, or just threw some concrete, make it nice and quick. But since I had all the material already, and I had this mound of gravel base just in the corner of my lawn, I just decided to make it a paver pad. So if I would have started this job from scratch, I probably would have spent maybe about $300 more or less, because you have your gravel base, you have your sand, you have your pavers, you have your polymeric sand, you have your edging, and whatever miscellaneous tools you might need. So right here, I'm just throwing the base in there, trying to level everything out. Just using a 2x4 just to get everything level. Just hitting it with a little water just to compact everything. This hand tamper gives you a pretty good workout. I fast forwarded this part, it looked like it only took a few seconds, but this probably took about 15 to 20 minutes. Hand tamper, come back and wet it, and then hand tamper again. If you have a plate compactor, even better. But if we're doing this DIY, for the most part, you're not gonna have a plate compactor. This is gonna be our paver sand. We wanna go just about 1 inch with this paver sand. So this sand, I believe it's called Colorscape, and I bought this sand from Lowe's. When doing any type of paver job, I wouldn't recommend this paver sand just because it's very difficult to work with. For one, if it's too wet, it's hard to screed. I believe that's the word for it, like to kind of level everything out. And then it has a lot of real big pebbles in it. And when you're trying to screed the sand, those pebbles kind of streak with the sand and leave like big marks. They look like big gashes in there. So if you say, okay, well, it's too wet, I'm gonna kind of wait for it to dry up a little bit. When it dries, it clumps up like crazy, and then you can't even work with it. So right here I have some landscape edging, and this is gonna go on the back of the base there. So I'm just scoring it with my skill saw, and I have to actually cut it by hand. And this piece of landscape edging is the only thing that I didn't have left over from that previous patio that I built. It was kind of expensive, but it was something that I had to get because I didn't want any shifting or any movement in the soil, in that sand or the gravel base. Came out pretty good. Putting it right here in the back. So this sand I had left over. So I did a third job after this, and from Home Depot, they have, I think it's called Paver Stone sand, which is the same price as this sand here. And it's like night and day. That sand was just very easy to work with, didn't clump up, didn't leave streaks, very easy to level. So out of the two, I would definitely choose that Paver Stone sand. So right here, I already started the pavers. One thing you're gonna wanna do if you decide to do a patio or something like this, just a small little job, is you're gonna wanna measure 3-4 times just to make sure all your lines are correct. Because if you don't really measure or just do it just by eye, what's gonna happen is right towards the middle of your job, you're gonna notice that it can start going offline. And you're gonna wanna start your pavers in the L pattern, the way I have them here, and then you work your way towards the middle. The reason you don't just start on one side and then come back to it is because you want to make sure everything's square, right? So if you kind of go in an L pattern and you come in towards the middle, you can kind of see if you have any gaps that just don't look right. But if you do that L pattern all the way out and then you come in towards the middle, you can kind of see where it's level, where it's not square, where you need to move, and kind of adjust from there. So the pattern I'm using here is taking 2 of the bricks, lining them up one direction, taking 2 bricks next to it and lining them up in a different direction. So here all the bricks are laid out, and now it's time to take some landscape edging and just install it here. Just keep everything nice and tight, make sure nothing moves. And this soil was so tight that I couldn't hammer in these plastic stakes. Every time I tried to hammer them in, they kept on breaking. So I actually had to go out and get some big metal stakes. Now it's time for the polymeric sand. Now this stuff does come in different colors. The color I'm using here is just like basic sand. And if I were to do it again, I would have probably used the gray color just to give it some contrast. You want to make sure you get it in all the joints here. So one thing I didn't do, and it's probably a good idea if you do, is so after you get everything into the joints, even after you brush it off, you're going to want to hit it with a blower, because if you don't, you're going to have a lot of that polymeric sand, a thin layer of it across all of your pavers. So when I actually did my big patio with the pavers, I just hit it with the brush. I just brushed everything off and then I wet it, right, to set the polymeric sand. And I had a thin layer across all of the pavers of polymeric sand. So you're going to want to make sure that you blow it off. You want to make sure that you have no sand or the least amount of sand possible sitting on your pavers. And there it is right there. Looks real good. So now I'm just wetting it, getting that sand set, and we're all done. I do also have a video of me installing this cheap $150 Amazon shed if you want to check that out. And I will have it linked because I believe it's also on sale right now. So I want to thank you for watching. Check you on the next one.